back to Native Strength. Do you remember the story about the two wolves, the fear feeders? One is good and one is bad. The bad wolf feeds on your fears. When you say to yourself, I'm not good looking enough, or I'm an idiot, you're feeding this bad wolf. It's your fears that make you say these things to yourself. So we call this bad wolf our fear feeder. The more you say these things to yourself, the stronger this bad wolf will become. Like just about everything in Native Strength, there's a wheel of fear feeder voices. There's also a wheel of excuses we tell ourselves. These two are closely related. When we use one of the excuses, it's like setting the table for the fear feeder. For example, we could tell ourselves, I can't do that, it's scary. It's a logical assumption that you're saying it's too scary for you. So you're saying you aren't capable of facing this situation. You're telling yourself you are incapable of facing a fear. Do you see how this can be like an appetizer for your fear feeders? If you're like me and you grew up watching Jacques Cousteau and his marvelous underwater adventures, you might have said to yourself, I wish I could do that. I certainly did. As I got older and my work took me to Hawaii, I realized that there were opportunities for me to actually learn how to scuba dive. Some people might tell themselves they could never do that for one reason or another. I was afraid of sharks. To enjoy the beauty and wonders of scuba diving, I would have to overcome my fear. Now, I could have used any one of the excuses on the wheel of excuses, or I could decide I wanted to scuba dive badly enough to quit making excuses, face my fears, and just do it. I'm so glad I did. I would have never had the marvelous experiences I did if I had let myself think I couldn't do it for one reason or another. If we say I don't know how, we're saying we're ignorant and incapable of learning in a roundabout way. One of the most popular excuses is, I can't. We often follow that with a list of reasons. I can't because whatever. What we're actually telling ourselves with this excuse is, I'm incapable because of whatever reason. You're telling yourself you are powerless and have no ability to take back your power. You're saying you're incapable of learning or facing your fears. And that's simply a choice we make. It isn't set in stone. Then there's the timing and patterns excuse of the Northwest. I would if I could, but followed by a list of reasons why circumstances beyond our control stop us. This is an obvious giveaway of our power. If we really want to do something, we should be able to find a way, even if it takes some planning and patience. If I really wanted to learn to scuba dive and wasn't in Hawaii, I could have saved up for the vacation. There are even quarries people explored underwater in Indiana if I wanted to prepare myself before I went to the ocean. In the North, our excuse becomes, I don't understand. This is telling yourself you're too stupid to learn and can't be taught. It's giving up on yourself. Scuba diving requires a lot of education about the effects of depth, how to read gauges and use equipment. It would have been easy to say it's too complicated. Then there's always it's too hard. Here, you know you're capable, but you're just plain lazy. We can always find excuses for sitting at home, but it's the people who work hard to go after their goals who are rewarded. It's a sure bet that sitting in your favorite chair won't change things for the better in your world. In my example, it takes a tremendous amount of effort to go to the ocean, learn all you need to know to be safe, make sure you're in good physical shape, and get into the water. But nothing compares to seeing the fish, hearing the whales, and holding a sea cucumber firsthand. Remember Scarlett O'Hara? In the East is her favorite excuse. I'll do it tomorrow. Procrastination can be a subconscious plan to not do anything at all. At some point, it will be too late, and you can just forget about it. In the Southeast, we have, I'm too tired, to fall back on. With work, family, and daily chores, this is a very believable excuse. But remember, we're not making excuses to someone else. We're making them only to ourselves. If we really want to do something, we'll find the time, even if it's just 1 minute each day. A little bit of something is better than nothing at all. If we use this excuse, it may be that we really don't want to do the activity in question after all, and just feel like we're supposed to in order to please others. Or it could be that we've spent too much time pleasing others and there's no time left for us. Either way, if this excuse comes up repeatedly, you need to re-examine your priorities. If none of these excuses fit your needs, the center one will always work. I don't care. It's a catch-all, like the junk drawer in the kitchen. If we don't know which excuse to use, this one will always work. Many times people fall back on the center excuse rather than admit to themselves that they don't understand the problem, or that they don't know how to change things, or that they're afraid. They think they save face this way. It's a way to not admit our shortcomings to ourselves. But in all actuality, none of these excuses are respectful to yourself. They all begin to feed the fear feeders. Now, let's look at the main course, the big meal we give our fear feeders when we allow ourselves to feel like we don't measure up. All of the wheels we've looked at so far have started in the south or the southeast and moved clockwise, but not this one. This one starts in the south, then moves north, then west, then east, and then to the center, followed by the non-cardinal directions. You'll see what I mean as we go along. We start in the south of the wheel of fear feeder voices. This direction stands for the myths we tell ourselves. For example, let's say we failed to do something important to us. We could tell ourselves that it really doesn't matter anyway. We could tell ourselves that since no one is aware of our failure, it's not that important. Or we could tell ourselves that failure is inevitable because we've always been bad at doing things like this. These are lies. Our failure is important to us. We aren't destined to fail because we've had trouble in the past. We're just telling ourselves these lies to ease our pain. But it's like a Band-Aid on a major infection. Lies aren't going to make anything better. Next, we move to the north. We could tell ourselves that we shouldn't have been doing that anyway. That activity's for the opposite sex, or for the rich, or poor, or whatever we aren't. We reason away our defeat to make ourselves feel better. This is like saying, other people are better than me because they got a better start in life, or went to a better school, or are taller, or are shorter, or whatever. This is like telling ourselves there's no way we can overcome a rough start or a major deficit. It's telling ourselves we aren't capable of overcoming. It puts us down rather than lifts us up. Now, if we had said to ourselves, well, no wonder you didn't succeed this time. Everyone else had much more practice. But if you had the same amount of practice, you would have blown them out of the water. Next time, all we have to do is practice more. Do you see how the fear feeders bring us down and our inner elders lift us up? Our third step takes us to the west. This stands for daydreams we tell ourselves. For example, we could tell ourselves we always fell short in the past because the people in positions of power just didn't see how great we were. In the future, we'll be around smarter people, and they'll see how wonderful we truly are. This sets us up for failure for many reasons. We aren't prepared to do the work necessary to better ourselves. We're relying on others for our success, and we're expecting a different result. Expectations are the seeds of disappointments. We can hope, dream, and even prepare, but if we expect something good to happen, we're taking a chance on inviting disappointment. Our fourth step takes us to the east. Since this is the direction of enlightenment, you can see how this would be the direction of pretending that we know things we don't. Instead of admitting our ignorance and taking the steps to learn, we tell ourselves that we already know it all. When we adopt this way of thinking, we're also telling ourselves that the rest of the world doesn't see how smart we are. Now we've set ourselves up to not be recognized for our supposed brilliance. This will be a self-fulfilling prophecy. The cycle repeats since we don't take steps to learn. If someone does give us a chance to show our knowledge, we'll fail because we haven't taken the time to admit our ignorance to ourselves in order to become educated. Next, we move to the center. The center is the place where we're able to make the most change in our life. It stands for the creative catalyst energy. The center of the Fear Feeder Voices wheel is another wheel. This is the wheel of self-authority, and it shows us how to escape the circle of fear feeders. We'll go over that wheel later. It's our fifth step because the number 5 stands for understanding. We understand how we've been telling ourselves lies that keep us from achieving our goals. Our 6th step stands for cooperation, and it sits in the southeast. We tell ourselves that avoiding confrontations at all cost is the ultimate goal. That sounds good, right? But when we go along with the crowd or our loved ones to avoid unpleasantness, we aren't being true to ourselves. Now we have to pick our battles to be sure. The choice between chocolate and vanilla ice cream isn't worth fighting for. But there are times when we tell ourselves that it's more important to get along with everyone else than to stand up for what we truly believe in. This can be damaging to our sense of self-worth because it's telling us that our opinions and feelings don't matter. We aren't as important as everyone else. Our major discomfort isn't as important as not rocking the boat for everyone else. And this makes our inner children feel unloved and neglected. This has the effect of making it difficult to see beauty in the world. We become sad and depressed, and our inner light begins to dim. Our 7th step can be confusing. It sits in the southwest, the direction of interpretation. And so, your interpretation of events is what is used against you to feed your fears. When we compare ourselves to others and feel as though we have room for improvement, we can fall into the trap of telling ourselves that we're only in competition with ourselves, which, of course, is absolutely true. But, and it's a big but, we have to go out in the world. We have to compete with others. Whether it's for a job, romance, a place to live, we are in competition with others in the real world, and we can't deny that fact to ourselves. There's a very fine line between being aware of this and being overly obsessed with comparing ourselves to others. The key to overcoming this is to have confidence in your ability to do your best and not get caught up in the guilt, blame, and shame triangle if you can't compete with someone else at this point in time in your life. Remember, this is our 7th step, and 7 stands for freedom. So conquering this step will give you tremendous freedom from your fear feeders. We have to have patience with ourselves. Our 8th step puts us in the Northwest. Our fear feeder voice tells us that things really don't matter anyway. If we've lost a job or a raise, we tell ourselves that things would have probably not worked out anyway and that we're better off where we are. Sour grapes. This keeps us from trying to improve our life because it feeds our fears of change. The 9th and final step is in the Northeast. We tell ourselves that the deck is stacked against us and that it doesn't matter how hard we try, we'll never be successful. This gives us permission to quit trying. Now we're stuck on the circle of fear feeder voices because we've convinced ourselves there's no use trying to change things. We're destined to lose in life anyway. Everyone is familiar with these thoughts. The more we allow ourselves to think them, the stronger they become. We won't silence them by simply telling them to shut up. We have to replace them with positive thoughts. But what positive thoughts? Now it's time to go back to the 5th step. Remember, 5 stands for understanding, and gain some understanding about how to replace the fear feeder voices. There are 10 steps to assuming self-authority and silencing the fear feeders. These are your inner personas, and their voices will always lead to change. You may hear something like, "Calm down. You know you always get everything done in time." Or, "Forget what they want you to do. What do you want?" Or even, "You can do this, just one step at a time. First things first." The first step to assuming self-authority and overcoming the fear feeders is to realize that adversity is a way of gaining valuable experience. We learn when things go wrong. Like my grandmother always said, "You won't try that again, will you?" The second step is knowing that there will be mistakes and losses. We can't learn if we aren't willing to make mistakes. It's only by trial and error that we find things that do work. This is a basic scientific method. The third step is knowing how to lose builds strength in character. Some people get angry with themselves when they've made a mistake. They spend time and energy blowing off steam. They may even break things. When I was a teenager, I went through hairbrushes like crazy because every time I got mad, I broke one. I would slam it on a countertop, a steering wheel, anything in sight, until one day the end flipped back and hit me in the face. Once I learned my lesson, I saved lots of money on brushes. I also got back a lot of time I would have wasted being angry over things that couldn't be changed with anger. When I lost to others, I learned how to congratulate them on a game well played or an audition well done. Our 5th step teaches us that using constructive criticism builds character. For example, if I had blown an audition, I could tell myself how horrible I did, that my voice was flat, my reading monotoned, and that I wasn't paying any attention to the choreographer. Or I could tell myself I did the best I could at the time, and that next time I can learn the show in advance so the reading will be familiar. Learn the songs so I'll know how to sing them in key, and study what style the particular choreographer is fond of before I even get to the audition so I'll have a head start. If I had let my fear feeder voices simply berate me, there's no way that would have helped me do a better job next time. Constructive criticism helps you to overcome the problem. It doesn't put you down for your failure. Our 6th step takes us to the adversity circle of losing and the challenge circle of winning. These two circles are part of the 3 circles of life experience to gain the essence of character development. I'll explain all of that later. The 7th step of assuming self-authority tells us that we aren't going to learn anything from our experiences until we're able to take some responsibility for our successes and failures. We'll see these experiences as happening to us or around us, and not for us to learn from. In our 8th step, we see that learning how having self-authority is the key to being able to learn from our life experiences, and that this is the purpose of life. We're here to learn and to grow so that we can move on to our next phase of existence. Now, the 9th step reminds us that losing is unavoidable and just. If we win all the time, we won't learn anything. We have to experience failure so that we know what doesn't work. The 10th and final step tells us that just like losing, winning is also unavoidable and just. If we keep trying and learning, we'll ultimately be successful. This step not only teaches us how to win, but how to look at others who have won. They aren't special people or blessed by the gods, but just like us. If we work hard and keep our minds open, we can be just like they are. I want to tell you an Inuit medicine story about learning to love yourself. There was a lonely orphan boy. He was so sad and hungry all of the time that he never stopped crying. The people of the village would give him scraps of food, but it was never enough to satisfy his great hunger. Of course, it wasn't a hunger for food that made him cry all of the time. The boy is like us, always seeking approval from others. No matter how many times others acknowledge us, it's never enough to satisfy our need for love. The villagers were tired of hearing him cry all of the time. They had tried to care for him as best they could, but it was never enough. And they shunned him. The poor boy was all alone in the world. He had nothing and no one. He found a stone. It was a nice big round stone, and he began to sleep with it and carry it everywhere he went. The people all made fun of him for this, but it was his only possession. He was cold and hungry, but at least he could wrap himself around the stone. One night it was especially cold, and the wind began to blow hard. First, his hands grew cold as the stone was taking the heat from his body. His face rested on the stone as his legs began to freeze. The poor lonely child had but one tear left, and it fell on the stone. The tear cracked the stone a tiny bit, and then it broke in two. Out of the center of the stone stepped a strong young man. He scooped up the boy and told him how much he loved him and that he would always be there by his side. He hunted for the boy and made a warm igloo to keep him safe. You see, the boy learned to love himself. He learned he didn't need the others to care for him or to tell him he was worthy of their love. He had the strongest warrior of all right inside of him. I hope you're able to find your strong warrior inside of you. Until next time, I'm Hypatia Lee, and you've been watching Native Strength.